I think in that moment where you reach down into the depth of your being and you pull out something that you're afraid no one else has ever been through, and then you share it with someone and they're like, oh my God, me too. I think that experience alone is what I'm after now as an artist. And I've got to do this for the rest of my life.
Hello and welcome to Out Loud, a podcast by and for queer people of faith in the South. Here we tell our stories of varied religious upbringings, messy coming outs, and the gift of community with one another. I'm your host, Greg Thompson, and the voice you just heard was Brian Falduto. Brian is an actor, singer-songwriter, life coach, and host of the Gay Life Coach podcast. At age 11, he was cast in the film School of Rock and later performed in various Off-Broadway and Regional theater productions. Brian attended Catholic school growing up and has gone to predominantly Protestant churches on and off throughout his life. After finding a church that accepted his sexuality, he was inspired to write his latest single, God Loves Me Too. In our discussion, we hear the story behind the music, as well as how Brian overcame the internalized homophobia he felt growing up. Brian also shares his perspective on spirituality and mindfulness, as well as his favorite self-care practices. Brian uses the gender pronouns he, him, they, and them. And before we dive into our conversation, I've got just a few announcements. The Q Christian Conference is this January 20th through 23rd. QCF is a fantastic event that we've mentioned before on the show that brings together LGBTQ+ Christians and allies. Due to COVID-19 concerns, QCF will be gathering virtually this year. But this year is extra special because we'll be doing a live episode of Out Loud as part of the programming. You'll not only be able to hear the show, but see the show, which is super fun. You can catch us on Thursday, January 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, but you have to register. Registration is just $50 for the entire 4 days of programming. Learn more at QCFconf, that's QCFconf.org. Link is in the show notes. And if you're in the Richmond, Virginia area, you can catch me at my regular yoga classes at the Boho Fit Studio in Brooklyn Park. Just follow me on Instagram at It's Greg Thompson or sign up for my email newsletter to get the latest schedule updates. And finally, Out Loud does not happen without your help. As we start the new year, consider making a contribution to Out Loud as part of how you'll give back in 2022. You can become a member of our Patreon page to give regularly, and any contribution is greatly appreciated. And now, let's hear from Brian Falduto. Brian, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I like to start every episode just by asking folks pretty broadly to tell me about what's the religious background of your childhood.
Yeah, I grew up going to church. I was Protestant. The First Reformed Church of Lincoln Park is where I grew up. That was my church family. I think First Reformed, I've never actually looked into it, but I think I'm similar to like a United Methodist sort of thing. I feel like there's a First Reformed church, a governing church, and then there's like different branches of that. But in third grade, I actually started going to a private Catholic school. So I got a double dose of two different religions all throughout my childhood. I got the Protestant side of things and then the Catholic side of things. And then I stayed in Catholic school until I was a senior in high school. And then I graduated and I went to college. So quite a long time. I feel like religion and my childhood were fairly inseparable. Like it was right there every step of the way. I'm a performer, and the first time I ever sang was in church. I'm actually writing a kid's book at the moment, and the opening page is me belting as loud as I can in a children's choir in church, and the choir director is saying, "Why can't everyone sing as loud as Brian?" Which is a real memory I have. And then school, I feel like in private school, it felt like we went to mass every single week, for crying out loud. I feel like there was we had theology class. It was just so there. And I actually recently helped my parents move, and I discovered a journal from when I was 11, 12-ish. And it was, I'm just so surprised at how religious it was. Every other entry was a prayer. Or I would sign off and be like, "I'm gonna go pray now." Like just this like devout little kid. Yeah. So that's it. It was just right there, every step of the way. And then I went to college, and I feel like this happens to a lot of gay men. I just discovered that people were living really happily with themselves without a dedication to church every Sunday. And these are people that I was coming to know, and they were from different walks of life. And also, I found a church near my campus, and I would go on Sundays occasionally. But in college, I don't know, I feel like it becomes difficult to do anything that's not studying, drinking, or like sitting around, right? I feel like it's one of those three things that's what you're doing. And then it's difficult to take on an extracurricular activity like going to church every Sunday, especially if it's off campus. So I would occasionally go, but I just, I started to develop a distance between myself and religion. My family church that I grew up in, the Protestant one, I always had good memories of that. But I think because of how tied religion was to my high school experience, I grew quite sick of some of it just got overwhelming. I feel like there's so many rules and so many things to remember, and so yeah, and so
Was your family pretty religious?
Yeah,
and are they still pretty religious today?
Yeah, my mom was sort of the driver getting us to church. I don't think my brother is very religious anymore. My dad was, I don't know, he it felt like he just went along for the ride. I've actually never even like heard his philosophies on religion. He's a very soft-spoken man, but he would sit next to my mom in church anyway. But his mom was super religious. So my Aunt Mary for 2 years now has been telling the story of how on her birthday, the congregation stood up and sang happy birthday to her. So church is a big part of her life. It seems to be the only story she can remember from the past 2 years. She's also 99, so it's very impressive. So yeah, it's been a big factor.
Do you remember, like, was your church outspoken at all about inclusion of the queer community?
They were not. And I think that was one of the big frustrations, right? Because I had this ongoing internal battle. And it kind of felt every Sunday. I've said this before. I feel like the aggravation on my end was like, why isn't anyone talking about it? Like if being gay is so wrong, I kept waiting for the Sunday where I was going to walk in and like they were going to have the sermon where they're like, being gay is a sin, but they never addressed it ever. And so I was left to go home every Sunday just wondering when they were going to talk about it,
Yeah.
But knowing that there was this rumor that it was super wrong.
So then how would you say that sort of coincided with like, with you coming out as, as a teenager, or when did you come out exactly? And was church a part of that at all for you? Was that a consideration?
Yes. So I didn't come out till senior year of college, actually. And I actually think that it had nothing to do with church per se. I mean, that's not true. I'm sure church was very much a factor, but I don't know if you know this, but I was in the movie School of Rock when I was younger. Yeah. And so I was referred to as the gay kid from School of Rock when that came out, and I was 11, and I didn't even know if I was gay yet at the time. So I just immediately denied the idea of being gay, because in 2003, if you're 11 and your fifth grade class of boys is calling you gay, that's meant to be an insult, right? So I was just like, so I became internally homophobic before I even had the idea that I was gay. And then when I started to get, notions that I might be attracted to boys, I instantly shut it down. And I think denial that at that early of an age, before you have any of your mental processings to deal with like feedback in that way, that's how trauma is created. So then I had trauma and it lives in the body. And it wasn't until I fell in love with someone my senior year of college that we decided to come out together. But I think religion was a tool in the denial process for me, praying every night that I wouldn't be gay, and also just like, I don't know, there's a lot of repression involved, obviously, too, to a degree, but I think that it was just having this like governing idea of right and wrong, I think just allowed me the space to feel right in the fact that I was suppressing all this.
Yeah. I totally get that. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I think I can really relate to what you're talking about, because I didn't really admit to myself like who I was really attracted to until after college.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something it was something I felt and that I can now name all these years later. But when I was in high school and in college, it was just not an option. And it was
Yeah.
kind of that, like you're saying, like that internalized homophobia that just kind of like lived deep within. And it's kind of crazy that like eventually it was just unlocked and I was able to kind of work with it. But for so long, it was just kind of held deep down in
Yeah.
there.
I mean, people underestimate the power of denial. Like, I convinced
Yeah.
myself that I was not gay. Like, it's not like I was lying to myself constantly. I convinced myself that I was not gay.
Yeah.
And then even to the degree that in high school, I feel like I would occasionally like go meet a boy and like only do stuff enough to the point that like I could leave that situation and be like, well, that wasn't gay. Like, like ways to justify with myself that the experience was like that any two guys hanging out would do that. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, denial is a really powerful tool.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and that's so true because I think just the experience too that I had in like high school was that the kind of bullying that comes with being in the locker room with other guys or whatever. Like the amount of time that you might spend saying, "No, that's not me. I'm not gay." Like, please don't make that joke at
Right.
me. Please don't direct that to me.
Yeah.
Ends up becoming this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of like, "Nope, it's not me. It's definitely not me. Never going to be me.
Yeah.
Definitely not."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can only imagine just what your situation was like because you were in that limelight with the movie and people were probably maybe making those jokes more often
Mhm.
than I think probably the average person at school. And so,
Yeah, I mean, I walked
yeah,
into high school and like the first step onto the campus, someone was like, "Is that the gay kid from School of Rock?" And that was 5 years after the movie. So I thought I was going to go to high
yeah,
school and get like a fresh chance, right? And then my first day walking into college, I thought I was going to get a fresh chance and like I was moving my stuff into the dorm and I was like, "Hey, were you in School of Rock?" And so I was like, "Yeah." And so like there was always a perception of me that I had to manage before I ever got to introduce myself as myself. So, like, my whole life was to a degree about dealing with the perception that was already out there.
yeah. When do you feel like you got to the point where you could just like own that and not have to worry about someone asking, like, were you in this movie?
Yeah, honestly, it was not till like after college, really. I remember someone came up to me once in the dining hall at college and was like, "I heard you get so angry when people ask you about School of Rock." And I was like, first of all, then why are you asking? Second of all, I don't get angry. I don't like start throwing things. I just, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it all the time. But
Yeah.
conversely, now I talk about it quite freely because when I did finally like I did this like, I've done some interviews and I've spoken publicly about the impact of the movie on me and blah 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 blah. And all these people have reached out about what the character meant to them when they were younger because they got to see themselves on screen, even though it was not my reality, seeing this sassy, flamboyant character on screen that was just like them was like cool. And so, and I think we're in an age where people have to talk about their shit, right? Or else we're not going to learn from each other. So yeah, I've chosen to embrace it. And especially because now I am an out gay man. So yeah, I as far as when that happened, I don't know. I think songwriting has been like a real big tool in that. Songwriting, you get to dig deep down and like expose truths that you wouldn't just say, So I
Mhm.
feel like it helped me discover a more truer version of myself.
When did you start getting into songwriting? Was that after college or?
Yeah, it was after college. I started working for a country music radio station actually when I
Okay,
graduated college, and I just sort of fell in love with country music. There's just
cool.
beautiful storytelling in country music.
Yeah.
And I was going through a tough breakup at the time, the same guy who I had come out with in a senior year of college. And yeah, country music, I just kept finding myself in the lyrics of country music. And then I was like, what if I try writing my own song? And then I did. And then it ended up being such a therapeutic experience for me. And I kept doing it. And then I was like, I'm never going to share these with anyone. And then sure enough, I had some wine one night and a friend was over and I was like, hey, you want me to play the song I've been working on? And then I played them the song and they were like, hey, this is really good. And then, one thing led to another and I started sharing my music and people were like, I go through the same thing. And then I think in that moment where you reach down into the depth of your being and you pull out something that you're afraid no one else has ever been through, and then you share it with someone and they're like, oh my God, me too. Um, I think that experience alone is what I'm after now as an artist.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that moment in time for me was so revolutionary that I was like, I've got to do this for the rest of my life. So yeah, and that's how I started writing. And I've actually, I don't know if you know, but I wrote a song about my religious upbringing called God Loves Me Too.
Yeah.
And people should definitely check it out. It's one of those songs where, it's a tough one for me because I don't know that it's necessarily even reflective of where I'm at spiritually in the present day. But what happened was I was sitting down and I reached into the depths of my soul, like I just said, and I pulled out something that I had needed to say for a long time. And I think it resulted in a really beautiful song that has impacted a lot of people. But just because basically what I was doing was being like, this is what my life was like with religion in it, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, you released that in 2020,
hmm
and so where would you say you were kind of like with your faith when you approached writing that song?
Yeah, so I was in LA at the time, and I was there for a project and I had a lot of free time on the weekends because I didn't really know anyone in town and I was there for a very specific reason. And I was like, what am I going to do with myself on the weekends? And then I was like, well, maybe I'll try going back to church. It's been a long time. And I Googled like LGBTQ inclusive churches and I discovered the Hollywood United Methodist Church. And I remember I drove up and there was a giant pride flag above the doors. And you walk in and there's like rainbows everywhere. And the pastor was even wearing like a rainbow stole. And, I took a seat in the back and a couple of aisles up, I saw a gay couple holding hands. And I ended up just sitting there for the entire length of the service, an hour and 15 minutes, just crying. I was, like not like in a weeping way, but just like in a really pleasant, nostalgic way. I spent all those Sundays in church hoping that anyone would even address what I was going through. And here I am in a church surrounded by positive affirmation of what I'm going through. It was a really impactful Sunday. And then I just kept going back every Sunday. Not even because I was necessarily that interested in like the Bible teachings, but because it was a therapeutic experience to return to
Yeah.
this building that I had for so long felt like I wasn't allowed to be myself in, and then have them say, actually, yes, you are.
Yeah. Mm. Did you know, like, before then that churches like that existed?
No, not really, not to that extent. And then what happened was, I'm sure you're aware, there's the Methodist Church is currently going through like a split, right? And so what happened was I showed up one Sunday just as getting ready for my hour cry, and I walked in and there was a very somber energy in the room, and I was like, what's going on?
Mm.
And then the pastor got up and she was like, I know that we all saw the vote this week. And I was like, what vote? I have no idea what's going on. And then she proceeded to go into all the details of what was going on in the church. And in that moment, I sort of realized that this Sunday refuge I had found was not I was just reminded that this is not the case everywhere by far.
Mm.
And that even within this denomination, there are churches that didn't like what was going on inside of this church. And then I just thought about younger me sitting in church, listening to the same sermon, but for those on the side of the vote that voted against the LGBTQ language, right? And I was like, I was just flooded with inspiration. And I went home and I wrote God Loves Me Too in 20 minutes. It was the fastest I've ever written a song. And yeah, the song has just become sort of like a message to that kid that's sitting in the church that doesn't know that they're going to have the option that I have one day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like letting them know that one day you'll be able to walk into church and be yourself, and it's going to be really cool.
How would you describe your relationship with church, like, before finding the Hollywood United Methodist Church? Like, what was that sort of time like for you and your faith?
I feel like it was just on pause.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just like something I didn't want to think about because I didn't know the answer yet. I knew what was a big struggle for me is that I never lost my love of like worship music. And so like I wouldn't be going to church. I wouldn't really be talking about God. I wouldn't be praying, but I would still occasionally be like, I want to listen to some Chris Tomlin right now, or like I want to listen to some Casting Crowns. And that always confused me because I was like, what's this? Worship music does something to the inside of your body. It's not even when I was younger, I feel like the whole reason I believed in God is because I feel like there was proof as you were sitting in a pew, like, and listening and singing songs. Like there's something that overcomes you. It's like,
Mhm.
and so I was like, I just felt torn because I was like, I don't want to let these songs go. I don't want to let this feeling go that I have, but I also don't want to go back to church. So yeah, it was just a time that I was on pause. And then I think the cool thing about writing my own song is that I kind of reclaimed worship music for myself in a weird sort of way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I can hear that in that track. Like something about the instrumentation sort of sounds like a worship song. And then you use the
Here I
lyrics
am,
from the
Lord.
hymn, Here I Am, Lord,
Yeah.
and which was played in my church a lot growing up and is one of my all-time faves.
Week
Yeah.
in private Catholic school. And here we are.
Totally. Totally. That one cuts deep though.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a tough situation and yeah, and you're not it's a very comforting hymn and sort of like a surrender kind of hymn of just like do with me, let your will be done sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
What has the impact of the song been like since it came out?
It's been really cool. Yeah. I'm really appreciating this conversation because I feel like I'm getting to talk about the full scope of my spiritual journey. But often when you release a song, and especially the way the media works these days, you get to accompany it with like one statement, right? And I feel like for a hot second there, I became like a mini version of a poster child for like LGBTQ and religion and like that cross section.
Mm,
And I was like, that's still not me per se, because I
mm,
am a very spiritual person, but I'm not actively going to church. I'm not, I don't pray, and I will be again. I'm excited to share where I am finding myself spiritually, but it's not. Yeah, the song serves a very specific story element of my life, a storytelling element of a chapter of my life, and I believe that there's power in that, but it's not the totality of like what I'm advocating for. So yeah, I mean, but you asked about the impact, and the impact has been great, and people have been reached out like, "Oh, I needed this song," and it's been beautiful, and it's also just been cool. It's kind of given me some cool conversations for getting future music out, which has been nice. But yeah, it's just it's such a specific song, and I was nervous
yeah.
to release it because I was worried about the perception. Like, am I suddenly gonna have to start talking about religion now? And sure enough, I did start talking about religion, but I've just been trying to do it as honestly as possible,
Yeah.
and it's a complicated topic, and people want answers just like I wanted answers when I was younger. And I think the unfortunate thing is that the reality is there's so much gray area.
It sounds like it's had a big impact on you. So I guess just kind of jumping ahead, like what would you say your spirituality is like now?
Yeah. Are you very familiar with like the Eckhart Tolle definition of spirituality?
I I don't know that I am.
Okay, it runs very. I wouldn't say it's identical to his, but it runs very similar to that. I do
Do you-
believe in a greater force, a greater purpose, but I think religion's gotten it really wrong over the years, and I actually think that being, presence is the force, is God in a way. I think God is a bad word for what
Mm,
fuels life. And anyone who's all interested in what I'm sharing right now should definitely check out Eckhart Tolle's work because he explains it a million times better than I. But have you ever meditated, Greg?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big meditation fan.
Yeah. Sometimes I get to a point in my meditation where I reach that same feeling that I got when I was sitting in the church pew singing a worship song, that I was like, it's undeniable that there's something else here. You know what I mean?
Mm, mm-hmm.
But I don't think that something else is anything outside of me. I think that something else is inside of me, which I also know resonates with a lot of people because Jesus is within you, right? There's that
Mm-hmm.
element. But I think it's less of a Jesus or a God. And I think that we all have access to a place of being. And when we're in that place of just being without thought, without identifying with who we are and our role in the world and all these things, when we're in that place, we have access to pure peace, pure joy, and pure love. And I think that that is what heaven is. And
Mm,
so I think that we have access to heaven continually if we can return to that place of being. And so my religion is sort of like now just trying to be as present as possible and sort of be a vessel for that force beneath it all, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's so helpful for me because I think I'm someone who meditates more these days than goes to church. And so it's helpful to kind of bring those two together the way you're saying that. Like, because I've had those same, I mean, I've had the like sitting in the church pew and the right song comes on at the right moment and just like cuts deep and I'm just like a puddle.
Yeah.
And I've had those same moments like on my yoga mat some mornings where I'm just maybe I'm doing some kind of stretching pose work, or maybe I'm just sitting still meditating and like, and then something hits and it's the same experience. So I that totally resonates with me, and it is hard to describe, but I like how you said that it's like it feels like it's something within, because I feel that too. Like it's not just some higher being far away, but
Yeah.
there's something going on internally.
Yeah, and Eckhart Tolle will be the first to say that words are the worst way to describe it. It's some, it really is. It's because words are, think about it, language is what resulted in our conceptual thinking in the first place, and our conceptual thinking is what resulted in all of our over-identification with all of our thoughts, which is what resulted in all of this separateness
Yeah.
of humanity, right?
Yeah.
And when really we're all just this one stream of consciousness, like we are all one. Yeah.
Have there been other theologians, thinkers that you've been influenced by as well?
Yeah. Very within that same lane of Eckhart Tolle, I'm really into Byron Katie's work, Deepak Chopra. One of the people I'm really into right now is Tara Brach, because she does a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a lot of that presence work, but she puts a Buddhist spin on it, which is nice. I would say Buddhism is another easy way to sort of explain where I'm at spiritually. I don't think that I'm entirely there, but it's a lot of those philosophies apply to the way in which I feel like I'm serving enlightenment in my life. And I also love that Tara Brach puts that psychological spin on it as well, because she's a psychologist and I'm a mental health coach. And so I love adding that mental health element of it. Because if you think about it, Buddhism is not far off from a therapy conversation either. Like there's a lot of that whole stepping back from your situation and becoming the observer, becoming the witness is also like the way that in psychology you gain power over the narrative that's influencing you, so it's all cool. It's all really cool. I get stoked talking about it. I spent so long not knowing any of this, right? Just like walking around, why me? I'm all alone. There's something inherently wrong with me. And all of the opposite is true. There's something inherently right with me. There's no wrong in me. In like the truest version of who I am, there's nothing wrong with me. So it's like, how do I tap into that as often as possible?
What kind of got you onto this part of your spiritual journey? Like what maybe turned you on to these thinkers and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago, I feel like I realized that I'm continually unhappy and that I kept entering like really self-sabotaging relationships and like just trying to prove myself over and over and over. I don't know. I guess I realized that the theme was me, it was very much, it was rarely the thing. It was my relationship to the thing. And so I was like, all right, well, I want to be happy. And then I was like, how does one become happy if they've never, especially when they were younger, they kind of accepted that they were never gonna be happy, right? How do you start to become happy? And then I don't know, I picked up a self-help book, and then I picked up a different book, and then mindfulness became my vehicle. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel like I ebb and flow in and out of that question too. And sometimes it's, at least for me, I'm someone who overthinks things. And so I think a lot of us are.
Same, girl.
And so I think sometimes it's finding the right tool, or throughout my life, it's been really about finding the right tool to kind of like shut that off, and find a way to be fully present in the moment and to have a good positive experience right where I am, and think when it's useful, but not think to the point where it's detrimental and pulling me away from what's what's actually enjoyable in my life.
Yeah, there's that great quote, "The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master."
Who's that by? Do you know?
I don't know. Can I claim it? No, just kidding.
Anonymous.
Brian Falduto. Yeah, no, and so that's where I'm at. But
Yeah.
and it's tough too, because like I don't think anything I said detracts from the message of my song. Because
Yeah.
the point of the song is that we are all inherently worthy of love and respect. Like, we don't have to do anything to earn those things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and we don't have to change anything to earn those things. And so that's the point of the song. I position it from a very churchy language, but that's the message. It's you don't got to change anything about yourself in order to be lovable,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. God, that's what I keep coming back to lately too. It's just reminding myself like I'm enough. Like
Yeah.
and those that phrase "I am enough," 3 very simple words, sounds like nothing, but sometimes when I really sit down and ask myself, well, what do I really think about this situation? What's really causing me to be stressed out about this or that? It's me worrying about like I'm just not bringing enough to the table right now,
Yeah.
and so much of religion is, or at least my experience of religion is reminding you that you're okay. That my favorite hymns are the ones like "Here I Am, Lord," where in the bottom corner of the hymnal it says the genre of the hymn, and it just says comfort.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that always resonate with me the most, and make me feel like, yeah, I'm gonna be okay. I'm enough. And
Yeah.
we find that many of us find that through religion, but then I think really like what you're saying, it's like, but ultimately we have to find it from within ourselves, and
Yeah.
actually like. And then maybe that's where God is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, within religion, yeah, but there's even like a societal, like the language that you and I are speaking right now is still very much the minority. Like there's not,
Mm-hmm.
we're a society of doing, it's just go, go, go. Even recently I was listening, I'm afraid to say it because it might go off, but I have a Google and I say, "Hey Google." Okay, it didn't go off. And I was just out of curiosity, I was like, "Share with me an inspiring quote." And then the quote was like, this is not what it was, but it was something that felt like this. It was like, "If you don't get out of bed and put your clothes on and do your best, then what is the point?" And I was like, Jesus. I was like, I was just looking for something to feel good about where I'm at, actually. There's so much pressure to be doing more than we are. Yeah.
Yeah, to be
Um,
measured by our productivity and not just like our inherent value as
yeah.
human beings.
Can I reverse the question? I just want to hear like what's your religious standpoint these days, or spiritual standpoint?
Ooh, you may. It's a mix. I think I recently moved, and something I always learn every time I've had to move. I've moved a lot in my family because my dad was in the Navy, and so I find that you have to kind of shed a lot of things in order to
Mm,
like move to a new place. Like it can be a number of possessions,
mm,
or it can also be a number of like beliefs too, so that you can then find what works for you in this new place, in this new habitat. And so I think for me, I spent a good chunk of time in my master's program trying to find different religions that worked for me. And I think I really just wanted to find good community. And I never quite found that. But I really found peace on my own doing meditation and doing yoga. And so I got certified to teach yoga over the summer. And it's been the first thing that I've been doing since I've gotten to this new place living in Richmond, Virginia, just trying to find, instead of looking for a church, I'm looking for a yoga studio.
mm,
And yeah, and so that's been, I think that I wouldn't say that's like my religion, but it's been a really wonderful tool for me. And so I feel like I'm more on this kind of I think almost by, maybe it's because of COVID and like I just haven't seen as many people, or maybe it's just where I'm at on my journey, but it's sort of this like inward looking journey right now.
yeah.
And then soon it will, I think I'm on the cusp of like really stepping into community again,
Mm,
and I'm looking forward to that. So it's both. Like I think probably for too long, I've kind of associated church with just community and not necessarily belief.
mm,
And so I've had to really interrogate belief and practice first now,
mm.
and then I'll be ready to kind of say, all right, this is the community.
Yeah. I definitely relate to the inward direction. And I'm also looking for a new yoga studio. I just moved to a new neighborhood at the start of the summer, and there's been like an outdoor class every Saturday, but now it's getting cold. So I need to find a
Mm.
different option. I don't do well with yoga on my own. I don't know. If I have the option, I'm probably not going to hold the pose as long as I should, you know?
How has, as far as your journey and what you've been thinking about, does it have a community component to you for you right now?
Well, yes, I've been on I don't think that the mindfulness conversation is very prevalent within the queer community. And so
Mhm.
I've been on a little bit of a mission to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
If you think about what most of the community is, I hate generalizations, but I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of clubbing. In some stereotypical senses, there is a lot of clubbing and a lot of talking about pop culture and a lot of joking around and talking about sex. And I have no problem with any of it. I want everyone to do whatever the heck they want. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I walk into some of these circles and I'm the only one who's like, let's sit down and talk about how you're feeling, or and I'm like, what went wrong with your day? Actually, I'd love to hear about, and I don't mean to be that guy either, but it's like, I don't know. I'm losing interest in everyone being okay all the time. I don't know if you're into Glennon Doyle's work at all, but I think it's one of my favorite chapters in a book ever. I love when she talks about, I'm an artist, so most of my friends have what our society would call mental illness,
Yeah.
meaning that they think outside the box and they're anxious and they're depressed and they have sometimes society is too much for them. And she's like, I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm not even remotely interested in talking to someone who doesn't have some sort of mental illness because, it's with the conversations that I'm passionate about. It's becoming almost the abnormal thing in my life is when I meet someone who's like, everything's fine, and I'm like, is it? Is it really fine
Mhm.
for you? Because if it is, I want to talk about that because that's fascinating. You know what I mean? Like I I want to go deeper with people. And I think a lot of that going deep process is being still, being present, sitting with emotions, and that's mindfulness. And so yeah, I just don't feel like there's a huge push for that in the community right now. And so I have my podcast and I'm doing my best to be playful about it and talk about it in a way that feels lighthearted. So it's not like I'm, imposing meditation on people, because that's not going to
Yeah.
work either. But yeah, I'm very much on the lookout for other doors in which I can create that community.
So talk to me about coaching. How did you get into that and that whole world?
Yeah. Just trying to give you the most honest answer. I think when I first discovered some of this, like, how do you be happy stuff,
Yeah.
I was just similarly to the church conversation. I was a little frustrated that no one ever, like, where was all this information when I needed it? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so I do have like a bit of a mission in mind. I'm going to be honest though, and maybe say something here that I haven't said on any interview though. I got a little egotistical about it for a while, which happens. I think when you're on a spiritual journey or a mindful journey, all those habits and the need to prove yourself come along. So, yeah, I think I spoke a little too early in a lot of areas. I was like, which is very much like me. I was like, I'm on this healing journey and everyone's coming with me, and so yeah, and it's a much more lackadaisical approach that I'm on right now. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to continue uncovering the truest version of myself and present that as an artist and see who might be able to learn from that or relate to it. And yeah. But as for the act of coaching, which is what your question is about, the act of coaching, I've I think there's a big misconception around coaching and therapy and most professional elements of like this conversation. You don't have to have any of this stuff figured out to be a good coach. Coaching is a craft, much like acting, much like songwriting. I think I've gotten to a level of coaching that I can sit with someone, I can be with them in a really vulnerable space and hold space for them
Mm.
and listen in a way that allows me to know what to ask next that might help them with their insights. It's a really honest process where I'm trying to help them see past whatever whatever limiting narrative they're currently living under, and just expand their awareness. And often I do that by helping them pause or checking in with their emotions. Or what's cool is I've discovered that I like that process, which is such a relief, especially as an artist. I don't know if you can relate at all, but like as an artist, I spend so much time wondering if I'm only ever going to be passionate about this one thing that likely I'll never be able to make a career off of unless I like hit it big. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
to discover something else that I really enjoy spending my time doing has been an awesome relief. And that actual coaching conversation between two people or amongst a group of people, I love it in a really non-egotistical way. And so I'm less concerned about necessarily preaching what I know as a coach. And I'm more concerned with getting intimate with people and then just being as intimate in sharing myself and as honestly as possible, which would not have been my answer about 2 years ago. So there's been a lot of growth as far as like how I view myself as a coach.
Yeah. I've worked with a coach before myself, and I've also worked with a spiritual director before, and I'm starting to offer spiritual direction on my own as well. And it's really interesting hearing you say that, because I think, I suspect at least, that preachers, pastors, priests, whomever, ministers, probably go through the same thing where they're in front of people every single week giving a sermon or a homily, and they have to take a position on something, and people kind of look to them as this obvious authority figure on this particular denomination, community, etc. And when I've worked with good spiritual directors before, that's never what we're talking about. It's never me interviewing them about what they believe or them trying to peddle something to me. It's all about like me and my spiritual path and what's working and what's not and how I've been doing, and asking all the kind of tough questions you were saying of like, how are you really doing? Like, tell me the bad things. And it's all about listening and just being attentive like that. And that it's a real gift to be able to do that.
Yeah. There's a quote in Ted Lasso that I remember saving in my notes because you watched that show? Yeah. He's like, he knows how it feels to hurt. And so he doesn't want anyone to get past him without knowing that they're hurting inside, And I remember that's kind of like, that's where I'm at. I'm like, I don't want anyone to like, I don't know, get past a conversation with me without having a human to human moment, It's Yeah.
That's a good show for a coach to watch, because that's a real good coach.
I know, one of my clients told me about it, and I was like, I do love it. But I'm on a lifelong mission to get my therapist to be my best friend. And so the plot line got really difficult for me because the coach and the therapist became best friends. And I was like, no fair. I want my therapist to be my best friend.
I love it. So you're coaching kind of primarily with queer people, is that right?
Yeah, primarily. I've actually been working with quite a range recently, but yeah, I mean the mission is still to have this conversation within the community, because again, I just don't. It's starting. There's things emerging. There's places you can go to have this conversation finally. And by conversation, I mean getting still, getting mindful, talking about your emotions, and there's definitely a shift happening. But I don't know. I've been to Fire Island. I know that that's not what everyone's talking about all the time. I know that there's still space for us to get more intimate and close with each other and talk about what's going on inside. And so, yeah, I do love working with queer clients.
What do you feel like is working for your clients, like on this, in the sense of like language? Like, is faith helpful? Is mindfulness or wellness kind of language more helpful for folks that you work with? Or
yeah, mindfulness is more just a tool that I use to help them take a step back, or to pause, or to check in with the body. I mean, so often the the issue is that we're just trapped in our mind, which is just a circular run of anxious thoughts usually. So it's like, if we can just leave the mind for a second and tap into the body, there you go. That's your coaching session. But I mean, it's an interesting question, because coaching is about using the client's language typically. So it's and that's part of the craft for me. It's how can I adapt myself to your situation, your circumstances, who you are, what you're going through. And then how can I cleverly introduce, a question or something you maybe haven't thought of, and I have different tools for that. sometimes even just sharing an observation. I don't even have to ask a question. Sometimes just reflecting back to someone what they just said is all you need to
Mm-hmm.
do, right? Because there's just we can only. It's hard to see your own shit when you're in your own shit.
Where do you hope to see, or where do you see like opportunity for mindfulness to grow in the queer community? Or if you could like start something tomorrow that was just, like what would it look
Yeah,
like?
I'm currently I'm currently in workshop mode.
Mm,
I launched this big community effort, but it was kind of like sometimes you need trial and error to learn what works. But I'm currently on the back end just trying to figure out the best way to really get this message out there. And I think what I'm discovering is that for me, anyway, it has to be an extension of my artistry or else I don't want to be doing it. Does that make
mm,
any sense? There has to be a storytelling component to it. There has to be, again, I'm done with the days of like pitching myself as an expert or like trying to, talking in the hopes of gaining clients, which, is understandable. Which I was trying to build a business. I'm not mad at myself for where I was coming from a couple of years ago, but it's if I'm gonna, I'm really happy. For example, just in real time, I'm happy with how I'm doing with this interview. For example, I don't feel like I'm answering any of these questions in a way that doesn't feel really honest for me about where I am and what's going on for me.
yep,
But at the same time, I feel like I'm sharing in a way that if someone's listening, they might be able to get an insight, right? That's like because they might be going through the same thing or they might have the
yeah,
same feelings, and so I'm currently trying to figure out the best way that I can share my share mindfulness in that storytelling way. And the
yeah,
way that society is going, it's not a crazy concept. I mean, Brene Brown has a Netflix special. Like I think
yeah,
we are to an extent, we are starved for people who are authentic in this world in that way, in that we're talking about. And there's also a mental health revolution going on, I feel like. So
hmm,
there's a lot of doors and I just got to figure out what my door is going to look like. And I'm very actively doing that at the moment.
yeah. I totally get and respect that. Before we wrap up, what are some like self care practices, things that are working for you right now? We've kind of touched on a few, but like, what's like your number one right now?
Yeah. I don't know why, but the first thing I'm feeling compelled to do is offer advice. If anyone is any sort of type A like I am, that can easily bleed over into your self-care routine. And so for a while there, I feel like I had like 20 self-care activities I was doing a day. And I'd wrap them up by like 1 p.m. and I'd be like, time to dive into my afternoon. What I've
I feel
landed
that.
on that I really enjoy, I do a pretty deep meditation every morning. That is my priority as far as self-care, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes. And then I try and at least get some gratitude in, and then if I gratitude journaling, and then if I have time, I'll maybe journal a little bit past that, just some additional thoughts or
Mm,
things on the mind. I try and read a teeny bit. I really like books that are broken down into like 3 or 4 page chapters because I like to just read a little dose in the morning and then some sort of and the reading and the journaling don't happen every day. Those are in an ideal world where I'm not completely zonked with things to do. But I try to get to the most days. And then the meditation is key. And then I try and do some sort of care for my body every day, whether it's a long walk, a stretch, just my PT exercises, or it's a full trip to the gym, something with the body. And then I have like uh, 30 other things that if I'd love to try and do, but piano is a big one for me. Sometimes I'll play piano right before I go to sleep. It kind of just is a last minute way to check in creatively before I go to bed. Yeah. I think that's enough for now.
that sounds great. Yeah. I got that question from my therapist recently, and I like gave her like the litany of all the things I was doing. She's like, "Oh, that sounds really good." I'm like, I can keep going.
Yeah, I think something that's been I feel like a mantra that I've been saying to myself is just because I can doesn't mean I should. And so like there's a lot of things I could do, but what are the things that I know are going to really hit home? And usually it's
Mhm.
just that moment of journaling and meditation in the morning and a long walk. If I have the time, a long walk. Oof. Oof. Tickle me pink. I love a long walk. I've never said tickle me pink before. Is that even a saying?
Yeah, yeah, it's the same.
Color me pink.
I've heard "tickle me pink," but I
Okay.
think it maybe in a different context.
Yeah. But yeah, I love me and Hillary Clinton have the same self-care practice in that way. She loves long walks too.
Hmm. Love it. Love it. Any projects, anything going on in your life right now that people should know about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too many details yet, but I was in Nashville a week and a half ago recording a album, and I'm super excited about it. And I think anyone who did enjoy God Loves Me Too or wants to hear more from me musically, I've got it coming.
Awesome. Well, this has been a delight. Thank you
A
so much for coming
delight.
on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg.
It is true, God loves you. It don't matter if you're LGBTQ.
If you'd like to learn more about Brian Falduto, you can find him online at brianfalduto.com and on Instagram at Brian Falduto. And be sure to check out the Gay Life Coach podcast too. Highly recommend. Those links are in the show notes along with some of the authors we mentioned during the show. And make sure you stay in the loop with the show by hitting subscribe or follow wherever you're listening and leave us a rating or a review. Those go a really long way toward helping others find our show. You can also find us on Instagram at Outloud Stories, and you can find me at It's Greg Thompson. You can also sign up for my email newsletter, where you'll get updates on all of my work, including the latest on Out Loud. You'll find all those links in the show notes as well. I'm your host, Greg Thompson. Our theme music is by JP Ruggieri, and we record in Richmond, Virginia. Until next time, remember, friends, queer people have faith lives too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thanks for listening.